What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we have another wonderful interview for you. We're going to be talking with author Rod Carley about his book RUFF and some of his writing habits, and even a question or two about the St. Lawrence Writers Festival, which is coming up this September, if I remember correctly. So,
That's right.
without further ado, let's jump right in. Rod, how are you?
I'm great, Matt. It's great to be here. And just for viewers, I'm based right now in Brockville, Ontario, which is an hour south of Ottawa, the nation's capital of Canada. And I am a humor literary fiction writer. I have four books out. Rough is my fourth. I am fortunate enough to be being long-listed three times for the Leacock Award for Humor, which is Canada's foremost medal recognizing humor. And I've received a few other awards along the way, which is always a nice little shot in the arm. I have short stories published in a variety of anthologies, and as being a writer, I've also worked in theater for many years as an actor and a director and an instructor, and I have directed over 150 stage productions, including many modern adaptations of Shakespeare.
Real quick, do you think that your background with the plays and the acting and things like that, do you think that's helped you be a better novel writer?
It has, and I'll tell you why. Where it's similar, whether you're directing a show on stage, writing a play, or you're writing a novel, the rules of in terms of creating plot that drive the story along, both for an audience in a theater or your reader, character, all those are similar. So I've been living in that world for a very long time, and my work is very dialogue based. And of course, working in the theater, that's constantly what we're working with is dialogue, right? And what's the subtext within the dialogue. So in a lot of my writing, I begin with dialogue, and that's where I find where the characters live and breathe, and then I fill it in. But to find their voices initially, I need to improvise some dialogue to find out what they're mad, what they're like. So they cross pollinate back and forth.
Right. I kind of figured they would because I've interviewed people who are who've written books who also wrote and directed movies, and they
Mm-hmm.
they say the same thing. It's kind of either way, it helps you kind of get into the mind of a character when you're creating something if you can kind of visualize the process and what they would be like and
Yeah.
how they would kind of interact with those situations.
Well, and also, like when you're watching a play, of course, or you're watching, actors with dialogue on stage and you're listening, right? In Shakespeare's day, they used to say you go to hear a play. And when we're writing our own work, we have to read it aloud because that's where you discover is the rhythm working? Is it clunky, right? So, first round edits all come from at least I think so. Reading your work aloud to see if it's landing. So that itself naturally lends itself to theater and vice versa.
Right. Because you
Yeah.
have to see if it flows.
Mhm.
Because if you're stuttering over everything when you're trying to get the words out and read aloud, then you that kind of makes something click. You're like, okay, maybe that isn't quite where it should be. It doesn't quite roll off the tongue
Mhm. Yes.
like you want it to.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's certainly with poetry, especially speaking it aloud, because it's all about the rhythm.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about Ruff.
Sure. In a nutshell, Rough is about a really bad year in the life of Will Shakespeare. It's moving into 1604. Will's now middle age, and he's not feeling too appreciated. He's feeling that there's new younger writers coming up there. They're nipping at his heels, and they think he's yesterday's news. Um, he's never home enough. His wife and children are back in Stratford while he's working in London. So he's not, he sends money home, but he's not a present husband or father. So there's always tension on the home front. And, his children, his two daughters, they only really see him at Easter. So he's kind of this weird uncle that shows up, right? And as well, he's grieving the death of his only son. That's a few years before when the book opens. But his dad has just died, so he's also got all of he's tabling all of that as well. He's going through a midlife crisis, and his receding hairline just keeps on receding. So we meet Will at this moment, like I just having a really bad year and trying to make a go of it. And there's a plague outbreak, and the queen dies. So two major events, which this is historically accurate. And because the queen had no heir, James came over from Scotland, became James the First of England. And you might all know, he was a bit of a wackadoodle. He wrote a book on demonology. He had a serious witch burning hobby. So, and there was a lot of restlessness of what's going to happen with this Scottish king coming in, right? And England was very xenophobic, and not many people wanted this Scottish king after so long with Elizabeth, which is not too different from our long reign we just had with, our Elizabeth. So what I've done with the story is his advisors are saying to King James, your popularity is lower than Loch Ness. So you got to win over the public, and they love going to the theater. So why don't you have a play competition? Disband all the companies, start from scratch, and the winner can become the King's Men, and the runner-up is the Queen's Men, and you determine who the winner is. And then the king decides he likes that idea, but all the plays, they have to be supernatural thrillers. They have to have ghosts and witches because of his obsession. And so there you have it. So,
okay, sorry.
No, sir. So I was going to say, so for Shakespeare, all in his earlier plays, writing ghosts, no problem. But since the death of his dad and his son, suddenly the supernatural is very real for him. And so he's got writer's block. And he's afraid it could lead to the chopping block. So they may need to bring in a ghost writer to help Will write the ghosts. So here he is at middle age, having to compete with all these young bucks to try to win this play competition to stay in business.
I'm definitely
during a plague, of course, which makes it even, we know what it was like with COVID, right? So a few more obstacles.
Right, make it even harder.
Yeah. Sorry, you were asking your question.
You've won and been nominated for many awards for your books.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to you to have readers connect with your writing on such a deep level that you're able to get these awards?
Well, that's what it's about, right? I've done some writing workshops on humor, and one of the questions we often get asked, Matt, I'm sure other writers too, is, so who's your audience? Who's your reader, right? And I think if one sits just trying to imagine who that reader is, you can get yourself, you spend a lot of wasted energy doing that. So first off, I start with the premise that all of my readers think exactly like I do, right? Have the same sense of humor. So that way I can just write the story I want to write that I find funny, that I want to tell, and then just hope that it connects with enough readers. And so I've been fortunate over the years to build up a readership with my books. Your book doesn't come alive until you have the reader. The same way with a play, until the audience is there, it's not. The relationship isn't finished, right? It's reciprocal. So my readers are everything, and it means a great deal to me that my work lands and resonates with my readers, and that they find my work funny, or they find the insights I'm tossing out relevant to their own lives, and that journey, as a writer, you need to keep nurturing that and building on that, and it's because once you're finished your book and there's the launch date and it's out there, in many ways it's no longer yours, because now it's in the hands of the readers and how they're going to react to it, and you'll get readers. I get readers sending emails and asking questions, and sometimes making comments on different things. And it's wonderful. And sometimes they'll be saying things that, no, I actually wasn't thinking that, but that's really good.
Right.
But of that moment there. And so I feel very, very fortunate that I do. And I work hard at my relationship with my readers. I also use social media and so that's a whole different area of how writers need to stay relevant to their readers and in the reader's eye when they don't have a book coming out, and really all awards is there nice little shots in the arm of validation on the way that keep us going for those long, difficult chapters of working on new work or all the other challenges of writing for a living, but they're nice little moments that sort of keep us going.
Right, exactly. And one of the things too that I love is you kind of touched on it, was that once your book's out there, you get people, giving you feedback and telling you what you think. And I've had a few times with my first book where people are like, I saw it going another way. What if it would have ended like this? I'm like, I don't know. What would happen? Because you get their imagination going off of what you wrote. And so you're like, I don't know, maybe
that
is a good idea.
And just on what you're saying, it's really important that you don't overwrite, right?
Right.
You got to leave you got to leave room in the writing for the reader to invest and be part of it,
Exactly.
right? Right,
You
and
got to
that's
you got
so
to leave
important.
room for them to basically what I like to say is activate their imagination,
Yes,
so
yeah,
that way they can feel like they're involved with the
yeah,
story.
exactly. And if
Um,
you work from the premise that your reader is far more smart than we are, which they usually are, right? Then and that's how you write. So I've obviously that's the way to come at it, right?
right.
Is to, with great deal of respect, and in your readers.
Aside from Rough, you've published other books.
Mhm.
Which one, if you have one, which one has been your favorite and why?
Well, of course, when each one's coming out, they are at that moment because you were so invested in the story. Um, I think I think right now Rough is because Rough um, because when I wrote Rough, although it was set in 1604, I was trying to write a book that was more modern than tomorrow, that really felt like it was present day, i.e., we were just talking about the plague and how the plague in the book mirrors the pandemic we've just been through, right? Um, and the climate change, like we deal with global warming. In Shakespeare's day, it was called the Little Ice Age. Everything was cooler than normal, right? So the civil unrest, crops were dying, which explains all the heavy, bulky clothing you'd see people in and all the very gloomy paintings of the day, right? Because it was, and dealing with fake news, which is, in our society, misinformation, disinformation with AI. If you ask the average Londoner in Shakespeare's day, what is the cause of climate change? They would argue, oh, it's Scottish witches, of course, right? So fake news is alive and well.
Right.
And I like to think that probably Shakespeare's dog in the book, he has a dog named Biscuit, and he's a beagle, that he gets more accurate news sniffing another dog's butt than the average Londoner does listening to people talking on the streets, right? And then I wanted to play with gender identity because, of course, in Shakespeare's day, women weren't allowed on stage. So you had young boys before their voices changed, cross-dressing, and it's a whole different. It was a lot more free, gender free, and
Right.
whatnot. So that's something that really I think is important in looking at today as well as women's equality, because there's a character in Ruff who's fighting for her right to perform on stage, and the whole punk scene of the book. Punk's been around, for centuries,
Right.
always been a subversive word. So there's a band in Shakespeare's play called Johnny Piglatin and the Hex Pistols, right? And they burn their lutes after their concerts and they piss on their lyrics. And the younger writers are all part of that new punk scene, like we think of like the Clash and Johnny Rotten in that sense coming out of the late 70s. Well, in the book, they're the new really angry poets that are coming up and fighting for social reform. So that's why, in many ways, this is my favorite book, because it was a challenge to write something for my readers that, although it's set in 1604, it really feels like it's today. It's modern dialogue, and it's not a Dusty Museum piece at all. There's no point in writing some Dusty Museum piece, and I think it just grabs the reader and just throws them into this world, and also it's the book that's required, the most background research and all of the work, and so and I think also because of my other life in the theater and a lot of work uh, directing Shakespeare, acting Shakespeare, teaching Shakespeare, I've always had that kind of love relationship with him, and I've really been about. I don't subscribe to false idolatry. I'm not a bardolator. I like it to get Shakespeare down on the ground where he belongs, in the pub where he belongs. So that it can be he's relatable, and that's why I wrote him this way in the book, where he's just a guy with a midlife crisis, and he just happens to be the greatest playwright in London. He doesn't know that, right? He
Right.
doesn't know that. That happened long after he was dead, that he became that, and he had no idea that he'd become as famous as he would. You know. So
Yeah, and I think that's the cool thing about you're trying to keep it accurate in a lot of senses, but also at the same time just give it your own spin to
Mhm.
kind of try to speak to a whole new audience, because I'm sure people who love the actual Shakespeare and things, they love the book, but then also you're probably being introduced to audiences who have
Oh.
heard the name but never really
Well,
delve
and I
into the
didn't,
work.
and I didn't write this, Matt, for Shakespeare lovers. I wrote it as a story that yes, if there are Shakespeare lovers coming in, there's lots of Easter eggs for them in the book, right? And there's extra, hits for them. But it's not written. You can come into this book with not knowing anything about Shakespeare,
Right.
and enjoy it and find out things along the way. Just wanted to write a really good yarn, right?
Right. Exactly. Outside of writing, what are some of your hobbies?
Outside writing from my hobbies. I love cinema. I love film, right? Theater, of course. I still direct shows, and occasionally I still act, and I enjoy that. Because writing, the initial creation of the work, it's solitary, and that's for me, that's like a book from beginning the research and then outlining and writing. That's about 2.5 years, right? So that's a pretty solitary process, and then you switch when you go into it being published and going on the road on a book tour. And I must say that my background in the theater helps me in that area, because then I can turn on the extrovert when I need to be signing books and doing book festivals, right? But the other reason why I love going back into the theater is because it is collaborative, and you're working together with a company, and I need that hit as well, right? Otherwise too much solitary confinement. It's like The Shining, all work and no play makes Rod a dull boy, right?
Right.
So I got to watch that. I also I do enjoy nature, in the sense of just sort of shutting everything down and just escaping into that. I need that little hit. I have 3 cats who amuse me immensely, and they take a lot of space in my social media. My readers know them, and because they're fun, and so they play into it. So animal rights do as well. And in fact, the latest book I've been working on is all about animal rights, but it's about a medieval animal lawyer, right? Because they did exist, believe it or not.
Really?
Oh yeah, at the very beginning. So I've just finished. I just finished the final draft of that. But it's it's looking at that, and that's something that's really important to me. Is And did you know, this is something interesting? U of T in Toronto, they have a law program. They opened a animal rights law degree. They started it just this last September. So now you can go into a 3-year degree, and it's all about defending animals, and also talking about them as sentient beings, and not treated and having personhood, right? So I think that's great, right? So
That is pretty cool.
I think progress is happening. We're seeing it, and I'm always when I see now there's fines if people abandon a cat or something, because all my cats are rescue cats, right? They were left in horrible situations, and then now they have a good life, right?
Right. I think that's a really good thing too, because especially at least in the United States, I don't know much about Canada with it, but we seem to have an issue with people neglecting and not taking care of their animals, or in instances they're just not getting them fixed, and then they have a bunch of babies and they just dump them because they're like, I don't know what to do with all of these.
Yeah. And there are, and that's why there are cities like I forget, I can't forget of the most recent American city, but there are now laws being put in place where you can be fined heavily if you are found to be abandoning an animal, right?
Yep, exactly.
That's outside of any kind of animal cruelty.
Yeah.
But if you found neglect, abandoning an animal, whatever, now there are fines. So
and it's good. We're improving, which is good, because they're just as deserving as us. So it's
there was an historian I was listening to speak, and his name escapes me at this exact moment, but he was talking about we've had all the different civil rights movements. We went to the Me Too movement, and Black Lives Matter, and Indigenous Lives Matter, and everything now with LGBTQ and everything moving there, which as we're fighting it more, what should just be common sense, right? Then don't you think it's just common sense?
exactly.
One day we won't need to have Pride Day or all of these days. They're great, but we won't need to have them because everything equality works. I mean that's my kind of utopian idea, but I hope for. But eventually we should. But this will happen. So this historian was talking about that animal rights is the next frontier, right? And so moments like we're just talking about, and I see that new legislation coming in, it's heartening, right? It's heartening.
It means we're going in the right direction.
We are,
and
sure. for all the gloom and the doom in the headlines right now and whatnot. And that's something else in the writing of Ruff. You know, in the book in Ruff, everything's madness, right? The world is total chaos. It's upside down. It's absolute chaos, right? The world right now is absolute madness and chaos. Well, it was 3,000 years ago. It was 5,000 years ago. It's always been madness and chaos, which paradoxically is what gives me hope.
Right.
You know?
I want to quickly talk about the St. Lawrence Writers Festival.
Sure.
Um, And for those who are curious, I have a whole nother video with one of the other board members, Michael Parks, where we dive deeply into the festival, its history, and kind of what's coming up for this year.
Sure thing.
But as the curator of the festival, what are some of the responsibilities that you're tasked with getting things ready to go?
Well, one of the great things is always budget, right? So you're looking at, because you know, we when we book in writers, we're paying them an honorarium for any event they're doing, whether it be moderating or being on a panel, and then providing accommodation, hotel accommodation, their meal per diems, and then their travel expenses. So there's a limit by how many writers can we bring in, right, in terms of the budget. And we do serious fundraising, and we have sponsors. And for a small festival, grassroots festival, we're building, and we had a very successful first year, and it's showing right now that we're growing towards another one in September. So that's those factors. That's kind of like you need to know what all your obstacles are, all your restrictions are, and then you can go forward. So one thing important is with programming is not repeating yourself. For example, this year we've got romantasy, we got romance, we have historical fiction coming in. So we're taking a break from Canadian horror writing. We're taking a break from humor writing and a few others, and thriller mysteries this year. I'm not doing that. And then we'll bring them back in next year. So it gives our audiences new genres to see, open them up to that. So that's important to keep it alive and fresh. It's also important that we're balancing headliners, well-established writers, with other well-known writers, but then also up-and-coming writers, right? And then local writers too. So it's a real mix that you want to get when you're curating to satisfy all of that. So that you got a reason for people to come in and want to come. So it's also recognizing that there are so many distractions that will take people, whatever it be, cinema, everything else online, just living on our phones, right? These things here, right? They get glued to. So if you're going to get them into your literary festival, you've got to find a way to make sure that what you're offering is entertaining, right? It's a real range. So we're not highbrow in the sense of that we're stuffy, and that it's quite the opposite. Right. It's a really readers get to engage with writers. There's lots of discussion in a really warm and intimate setting. But the primary objective for me, Matt, is that in a world that's becoming more and more broken in terms of communication, where people are feeling more and more isolated. And that seems to be the design of a lot of the media. They get us stuck in fear, and it's broken. And so what we need is the opposite, is to come together with storytelling, and we are all together, and we feel less alone. We feel connection, which is what the arts do. And so that's my prime mandate with why the festival is important and what we're trying to do. And I'm really excited with some of the writers we've got coming in this year.
You also host the panels, correct?
I host, yes, I do. Yeah.
Do you sit there and plan everything out, or is that something where you're like, you just kind of brush up on the person that you're having on?
No, you know what? I treat it very seriously, Matt, because I do a lot of work, and so I write. Sure, obviously I've read the books, but I've really read the books thoroughly, and I've made notes. And I've done my background, and so what I will do is I always do usually I do a Zoom meeting with a writer a few weeks before the festival, and we talk for an hour, and I'll go through some of my questions, and I ask them, is there anything they really want to talk about, right? Is there anything they don't want to talk about, right? So that, again, once you have all that structure in place, then you're free in an actual panel discussion, right? to go off in different directions because you've always got the foundation to come back to.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I was curious about too, because I was doing some research before I talked with Michael, kind of on last year's festival and kind of seeing what you guys did, and so I could kind of prepare the
Yeah.
questions so that way we could talk about, because with something that happens annually, you don't just want to always talk about the year before. You want to
No,
try and learn about what's coming up so that way people know what to look for this year instead of, oh, we did this X, Y, and Z last year,
that's right.
and you want to be looking forward.
It's being intentional, Matt.
Exactly, exactly. That's
You know?
that, that's all it is. Because I do the same thing with my interviews.
Yeah. Well,
I don't get a chance to read your guys' books because, well, I don't even have that time. But
yes.
I do comb through social media and ask you guys questions and read the blurbs and try to come up with questions specifically about your genre and your work.
Yeah.
So that way we're talking more specifically about you and your body than, just the genre as a whole, for
Yeah,
example.
exactly, yeah, exactly. So that is, and that's a big part of it, preparation, right? And I
Exactly.
think taking it very seriously. It's exciting. We'll be launching later in April. We'll be announcing the lineup, and we'll be starting to sell packages and whatnot. And then that's yeah, and it's really important for this region. It's an underserved region, and it's important to have these new arts initiatives in this area, right? And it also helps the local economy, right?
Right,
So,
exactly. I heard that Brockville used to actually be a pretty big literary hub. Like they used to have a couple publishers and things.
it yeah, but Brockville's an interesting thing. Brockville also, like in the 1960s, per capita for its size, there was a lot of money in Brockville back. A lot of millionaires. Well, there was a famous millionaire named the Fulford family, and he made money for called pink pills for pale people, and they were placebo. They were sugar pills, but they were all fake. But he made a fortune selling these pills. We would do it online now, but these were advertisements in newspapers. Like I'm talking, like in the early 20th century, made a fortune, right, selling these, and there were yeah, and others. So there was money invested in this city, in terms of a beautiful arts center and different things. So there was culture in this community that's always been there. Um, I think now thank goodness it's expanding away from its kind of like UEL roots and it's broader now. But there has been that. Um, but like a lot of communities where a lot of industries have had shut down, or we're dealing it right now with Canada. A lot of colleges now forcing to cancel different programs, right? Because they just can't afford
Right.
um, to stay to offer them. And one of the challenges is kind of like the cod. Well, and in one of our Newfoundland on our east coast. I'm not sure if it's happened in Maine in the states now, but they survived. Cod was a big part of their fishing industry, and they outfished, and so they fished all the cod. The cod are gone. Cod are extinct. They outfished all the cod, which dramatically affected that economy in a very negative way. Well, it's kind of the same thing with higher education, colleges and universities. The domestic base of students, the boomers have had their children. There are less kids, so you can't just pop and make new students, right? Because they don't exist, right?
Right.
So that's it. So then they've looked to international students, and then there's been some issues with international students. So it's a tricky puzzle right now. But then a lot of the programs became very reliant on international students, and then our federal government cut back the number of international students who can come into the country by a third. So that's affected financing. So um, we live in challenging times, and I know in Canada and in the USA, where there is less arts funding, right? And it's always been difficult. It's
Right.
always been a challenge, but more so now. So getting out and doing these literary festivals it's keeping that torch going, right?
Exactly.
And I still believe in that old adage that if you build something, they will come, right?
100%.
Right? Yet, because even if you're in a cornfield in Iowa,
Yep. It's so true though. I mean, that's now more than ever. That's what we need. We
yeah,
need the arts. We need the creativity. We need people to look within themselves and dig out and rely on that inner creativity to bring something good to contribute rather than, some bickering or an argument that is
And don't
going to
wait
go
around for
nowhere.
someone else to do it.
Exactly.
We have to do it ourselves, right? We got to be proactive. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Well, that's all I have for you. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
This has been great, Matt. Thank you. I really, really, really enjoyed this.
And I will leave in the description, guys, the interview with Michael so you can learn more about the festival itself and keep an eye on their social media to see what's coming up next. So,
That's right.
Rod, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt. It's been my pleasure.